Welcome, everybody, to Thinking Through Art and Design at Berkeley, Responsible Design from Bits to Buildings. My name is Björn Hartman. I'm on the faculty here at UC Berkeley. I'm one of the instructors of the course that is associated with this public lecture series. Arts and Design Thursdays at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive are made possible thanks to support from the Big Ideas Courses program in the College of Letters and Science at UC Berkeley, and from the generous support of Berkeley Arts and Design. In-kind support is provided by the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. Our speaker for today is Julien Beller. He's an architect and activist based in Paris. His body of work centers on how ideals of justice and equity can be expressed in the built environment, and how the pleasure of good design should be accessible to everyone. His practice is multivalent, and his approach is very participatory, with many projects undertaken and completed in concert with others. As a member of the EXYZT collective, for example, he's built ephemeral and festive architectures by appropriating abandoned spaces in different European cities. In 2012, he founded 6B, a space of work, culture, and exchange that brings together a diverse community of creative practitioners and is housed in a former industrial building in Saint Denis. Before I turn the stage over to Julien, just two other quick announcements. For students in the class who want to see this Sunday's performance in Zellerbach Hall, you can pick up tickets at the end of class with your TA, Eldon. And we do have a couple of extra tickets, so whether you're in LNS 25 or DESINF 95 and you're interested in this event this Sunday, please come and see Eldon at the end of class. Now, our semester is nearing an end. We will have one more public speaker next week, Amy Franceschini. But I want to put one other event on your calendar, and that is on Thursday, December 12th. In the afternoon, there'll be a public showcase where all of the student groups in the course that's associated with this lecture series will show their projects, from visual manifestos to exhibitions and imaginary conversations, as part of the design showcase in Jacobs Hall. And with that, please help me welcome Julien Beller.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Julien. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much to invite me. As you understood, I'm French, so I will try my best in English. And don't hesitate to ask me questions or whatever if my sads are not very clear. So I think the presentation was really good. I'd just like to tell you that I'm here for a week with a French delegation. We are making an exchange between Saint Denis, which is actually the city where I live, which is north part of Paris, which is a very, let's say, a poor city, very near to the Paris center, and which is being developed, being gentrified, and the question of how is the city growing is very strong for us. And so we are looking in Auckland how is it going on to try to exchange tools in order to find a better way to develop the city without displacement, with a new way of inventing the place where we live together. So first of all, I would like to tell you that I was studying architecture in France, in Netherlands, and I went abroad for a long time in Africa and in different countries to understand how could the world be developed. I'm very interested in bottom-up process, in trying to find new ways of building, and saying that everyone could be an expert and that we should valorize everyone to face what we have to face. Let's remember that there are huge issues, environmental, societal issues. We have problems, and we continue to live and to build our cities like before. But for sure, we have to change in order to survive. We have to adapt. We know that we were wrong on some points at the end of the 20th century. Let's speak about pollution. Let's speak about how to live together, to develop local, responsible and fair and just way of doing projects. We have to be more aware of the consequences of what we do, especially when we build a city, when we build something, when we try to program in an innovative way public services, commons. And so because the society was so much transformed with internet and with all those things, we for sure have to change how to work, how to live, how to displace. We have to be legitimacy. We have to gain legitimacy again. We have to be closer to the real things. Otherwise, we won't be able to continue. So sorry. So I will show you a few projects. I would like to try to explain you my professional path because it has to deal with little by little, with incremental process, and to invent a way of being an architect in our world and to try on where we need. So 15 years ago, I finished my studies, and I was really involved in different NGOs and non-profit organizations for 10 years. And now, let's say I'm more classical architect, because I think that for those 10 years, I was able to say something, and now people call me because I developed an identity. So I will show you projects. I think for sure that cooperation is a base that we have to work on more than solidarity. Let's finish to help the others, but let's try to find a way to cooperate and to be win-win-win. It's not I won and I will help you to win, but it's we can win all together. I think we have to be barefoot. We have to find new ways of beginning from the start. Of course, it's also a question of willingness. If we want to be invested in projects, we have to be invested in the governance. So we have to be able to choose, so that we will be more responsible in what we do. It's this word serendipity is important for me, because we never know what will happen, and we will have to adapt. It's a way of doing design. I'm not sure we should know in the beginning where we will be at the end, but we have to do this path and to go on and to do the projects with the others in order to find the right project, which is actually never finished. I think that the architecture gesture is not just before building, but it has to continue during the life of a project, because the building has to adapt to what is going on inside. So, of course, you imagine I try to be very careful on environmental issues, on carbon prints, on appropriation from the inhabitants, as I tried to explain, and also on the beauty. I think we need to be proud of where we are, of who we are, and we need to have joy, to have pleasure, to live in order to continue, and in order to find better ways to confront what we have to. There's also this question of how to involve people. It's about being responsible, I said. It's about beauty, about joyful, and it's about how to say, being active. I think the inhabitants are too much inactive or passive, and we have to find ways to put the people in the center of the decision, and so to be active. And so, you know, we were consulting people, then we make them participating. We think that now we have to valorize people and to focus on what is existing and to try to reveal it. So I will show you a few projects trying to illustrate my thoughts, and I begin with this EXYZT collective that we founded in 2003 at the end of the school. Because I think some of you are students, I try to tell you that, of course, the beginning of our professional life is during the studies, and it's important to be together, to find people with who you want to work afterwards, and to make what we would call collectives. And so it's kind of network that begins in school and with people that you want to work with afterwards. So that was a diploma project. We were 5 students making this diploma together to become architect, and we decided to make it in real. That's an idea also. It's that we are here to practice. We are here to build, and not only to think and to propose and to design. And so the design comes also with experimentation and with adaptation to the users. It's like what we could call user design. So this was a flexible structure in an empty spot in Paris, and we cleaned the spot, and we brought that scaffolding, and we organized dinner, and we were living on the space for 1 month. And the idea is to reactivate that urban space that we forgot that could be used. And it's just in the street, and those unused places, which are not in competition with the spaces that where developers want to build, or even the city wants to make a park. Those spaces are places where we can innovate, when we can survive for some people, where we can try to invent other proposals. So this was for 1 month. As you understand, we use the temporary projects in order to activate spaces. For sure, sometimes people want the project to continue, even if it's not that project at all. With EXYZT, we also use quite a lot the narrative, the fiction, and so we work all the time with artists in order to. We don't say we are making a housing. This was the landing off of the tower that Jean Nouvel was just having built in the corner of the street. And so we occupy the site, and we organize a big event, bringing all the neighbors and trying to turn the vision and to reveal the possibility of that space and the public space, because at the end we block the street, we make big food, music, meetings. It's always a possibility also to experiment and invent new ways of building. So many times with EXYZT we use scaffolding, we use wood planks, we use plastic that we would tendre, and so it's the language of ephemeral cities. It's the language of the building time that we try to put in new uses, to speak also about the flexibility of the city, and to say perhaps the city could change, perhaps the city is more alive than we think, and so we should be able to transform it even every day. So this event part also makes possible to work with so many great people, people who make fireworks, people who make art, people who would make landscape design and sociology and anthropology, and so it's really great also to be more than just an architect, an engineer, and to try to find a solution with all those different entries. It's possible to be surprised, and in that incremental process to find other paths. That was in 2006. We were invited to make the French pavilion in Venezia Biennale, and we went last year again in the French pavilion. Perhaps I will tell you later about it. And so that's great because Patrick Bouchin, who's an architect, French architect, who's specialized in transforming old industries into cultural places for the last 30 years. He made really great projects in France, showing that we can reuse old buildings and to put a new life into it with little means and with the energy of the inhabitants and the local culture communities. So it was really fun because the idea was not to make an exhibition, but to make an experience. The visitors, they could experience an architecture environment, and we worked with very famous French artists like Daniel Buren, Igor Dromesco, and so it was really a work with old people which are very legitimized and with young people who like to party like us. So the inside was like a diner room with a kitchen. We made a hotel in order to sleep in there. It's always also a possibility to have artistic installations. We make an environment and then artists can play with that environment. It's always the question we were thinking about this morning. What material do the artists use? Is it building? Is it? And so we think that it has something to deal with everyday life. The artistic moment shouldn't be just when you go to a museum or a gallery. It should shape our environment and try to push us in other directions. Of course, the body is important when you speak about pleasure and enjoying. So we have made a sauna. We always make things for the body. This is another project we made in Latvia, east part of Europe, very suburb, European suburb, where the Russians were and they left, and so there is many poor people. And we were working on bringing activity in the neighborhood, and we thought to make cheese because French people like cheese, and at the end we made mushrooms. So because there were forests, there was this cathedral, and all the people would live in such bars. And so the idea was really to reactivate, and the mushroom are kind of symbol of that. So through that fiction, through that narration, we made like mushroom growing, we made like exhibitions, we made like mush roof, we made like mush boom. So we used the story in order to activate and to bring people together, and then you have some architecture construction. This is other projects we did in London using building sites unused. So this is very quick and easy in some ways. A poor neighborhoods, you bring scaffolding, wood, water, and then the children don't go in holidays, but they could play and they could appropriate those empty spots which should be forbidden, but why? So yeah, you can see here that even with cheap materials, we try to make nice things and to put beauty in those spaces. This is another one in London. We did a windmill, and then we plant seeds, and then we would make breads with the people from the neighborhood. And this, of course, is opportunity to make art installations, theater, and at the end, they wanted to transform it into a new kind of public space, which is a kind of park, but useful for the association. So there's a kitchen, there's a bathroom, and it's easy to activate this outside space. So those projects we did all of those for free because we thought it was very fun. And most of them we were invited by art festivals or, as you saw, architecture events. After 10 years, we were not tired of it, but we wanted to go on and to get more professionalized, because in a way those projects we couldn't do it if we would like to be paid like normal people. We would take all the money to do something very great, and so that's always this trick to how much do you have and what do you do with it. And so because it was the beginning of our careers, we thought it's great to do great things, and then you are able to do other things and even to get more budgets. So I would like to show you this project, and Lamine, who's in here, participated in those projects. We made this NGO, Alternative Organization of Architects, which was working with southern countries and mostly in Africa. And the idea is to, we can see on the top, la main qui œuvre fait la fierté d'une nation. The hand which is working makes the nation proud. And so this idea of working together, of empowerment, of to say it's not because we don't have a school in a village that we shouldn't have it. So if the government don't build the school, perhaps we could build the school if we think it's important. So this year, this was in North Cameroon, and we were working in this Muslim village without electricity, and we noticed that the women didn't have a place to work, to meet and to develop, because we all know that the women are the key of the development. And so the idea was to make a space where they could meet, work, and invent and develop. And so we went there with students, and we would build with local techniques to valorize them. We would put concrete in the foundation, but then earth bricks, and try to mix modernity with tradition, so that they don't have to do all the past that we did in Occident, but perhaps they can go to sustainable solution quicker than us. So, for example, we had 10,000 euros for that project, and we used half of the money to pay this woman on the left, so she would make sewing education courses for 2 years. The idea is not to bring the money, is to bring just the willing and the energy and the idea that you bring together, and then the people, they have to be autonomous. Otherwise, when you leave, everything stops. Of course, it's other ways of building. We call it auto-construction in France, participative. In those processes, the kids can work. The woman, we had pregnant women who would work during all day. And so when you are involved, perhaps you can change also the rules. The idea, you understand also, is that building something is building a community. Nowadays, when you have a building site in a city, it's noise, it's dust, it's a waiting, and I think that those times should be more some way to build the community. So you imagine we did many books on that. The idea was to reveal a new way of doing public services, of doing commons, new way to build, new way to govern, and new way to use at the end. Another experience I want to share with you is an NGO that we founded with a teacher, working with gypsies in France. Let's say there are 400,000 people who say they are nomadic in France. But in our societies, you know, we have to be sedentary to get a bank account, to get a phone, and so it's very difficult nowadays because also the property laws. And so I worked with gypsy communities to reveal that they are not the bad people, that they are normal people, that they have other ways of living. So it was about mediation to fight against stigmatization, prejudice, and also to make very simple projects like putting security in a place, electricity, and always showing, communicating, and making the link between those communities with the global people. There is also in France always something with the rights, because we were one of the places where, you know, the human rights and all those things. So we have equity in our constitution. So we always try to go on those values in order to bring everyone together. It's less a fight to say we and they are different, but it's just we should attain the same rights. Because it's not written that you have to be sedentary to be French. So there was really many different projects, and one of the projects I did in that movement was in the Hanoul, which was a slum, the oldest slum in Paris, and I was working for years. We made like common spaces, great social studies, where do you come, where do you live. We noticed also with the students that those people are so inventive because they can live in 30 feet square with 5 people and they can do it, so it's very inventive. Like Yona Friedman says, I like that necessity is the mother of innovation. When you have to, when there's a need, then you would innovate and you would find a solution. So even if we did all those studies, we brought the kids to the soccer team, we made dancing in the city to bring all the people together. One day they demolished it. And so, yeah, we did dry toilets. So it was very fun because at 8 o'clock on the news, on the TV shows, they were saying those people are more ecological than us because they have dry toilet. Always try to change the point of view and to say perhaps they are better than us. Who knows? And so even if it was really great, all the things we did with them. One day, because, you know, politicians, one day they decide to destroy it. So they displace all the people, cost a lot of money, and then 6 months afterwards, I began this project with the city of Saint Denis. The idea was to bring those people, which were inhabitants of the city, even if they were very stigmatized, to bring them to normal housing. So we had to have many steps. You can see there are 5 steps from the slums to the collective housing in order to legitimize them, in order to make possible. So all those projects were in the slum. Then there was the demolition. Then we noticed that there were 300 people, but they didn't want to be such big amount of people because there had to be so many people in order to be strong with the police, with the neighborhoods. So we noticed that there were 4 groups in that group. So we identified all those groups to have a more strong community feeling and a willingness to build something. So we had 3 groups. Then we brought electricity on the next site. We brought also equity, saying that it's not because you are very strong that you have the biggest slot of land. It's because you have many kids. So this was the first plan. You can see on the left, and then all the different slots of land were different size, and we did that participatory way. We can see here. After that, we build with the people. So we had 5 different places, and little by little, it's getting more and more correct, I would say, and more up to code. So this was a very interesting project, I think, because it was very incremental process to bring justice. Now I will speak about the 6B experience, which is a great project I had the chance to found 10 years ago. So this is still in Saint Denis, north part of Paris, also stigmatized neighborhood or city compared to the other cities in Paris. There is lots of poverty, crime, black people, diversity, and so, of course, many young people, a lot of energy, a lot of creative professionals, and a need to invent. And so many people were looking for a space to work. 10, 12 years ago was a bit the beginning of a new way to deal with economy that we could call how do you say in English, social solidarity economy. And so also it was the beginning of working differently, co-working, making more synergy in the way of how do we do office buildings. And so this building was empty. I went to see the owner, who was a private company, and I told him, I rent you 10,000 feet for an amount of money. He said, okay, the amount was very cheap. And then I invited the people from Saint Denis to come together in order to work. And so for 3 months, I was making visits with many people. After 3 months, we made an NGO. We decided to begin that project, and no one was knowing no one. And me, I was not the chief. The idea was really to reveal the needs of the territory and to respond. I think that making architecture is not just to design, it's not just to build, but it's to respond to the needs in the city. So if you have an empty building, perhaps you can coordinate the project so it would answer to the needs. So all those people went inside. First, they would serve their personal interests. They need a work, a space, they need to heat, they need to have electricity. But then after 3 months, they need common things. They need to meet the neighbors, to have a drink with them, to share things in everyday life. And so that's where the common is needed. I think that the common is needed for personal interests. We don't make common for God or for whatever. We do commons because we need them. And so that's how the 6B projects went on. And the identity was revealed after a few months, because the first people who were inside, they were, most of them working in cultural field and in social issues, workers. And so after 6 months, this 6B began to shine and to say, we are a creative place, we are a diverse place, it's a cheap space to work. And so many people wanted to join and to reinforce the identity of the project. I wanted to tell you that story because for me it's important not to choose in the beginning what it will become, but to open the door, to make possible to use, and then to analyze what is going on, and then to emphasize and to valorize in order to be fair and not to fight with what should be done in that place. So we were lucky because the building is nice and well built. Those are the people staying in the building now. It's more than 200 structures, so that's 350 people. And it's a bit like a neighborhood because we have really different people. And that was a chance in that project, is that we were so many people that you have to find common rules which fits for everyone. It's not like we are extremely right people with a political point of view. When you are so many people, you have to be able to understand and to listen to everyone. We are in a neighborhood which was an industrial area, a bit like in Auckland. Industry left. So what do we do with that? So of course, urban developer come and buy and build the maximum they can, and of course we need housing, so it's great. But then the idea is how can we work with those different forces in order to make better neighborhoods with identity, with commons, with new type of commons, because the public sector in France has less and less money. So you can see this 6B. In the beginning, they wanted to change this building into housing, but after 2 years, they said, oh, it's great what you're doing, perhaps you could stay. And so we were dealing with them so they wouldn't build those buildings here between our building and the river. So the project, after 2-3 years, really made changes in the urban plan by the users, what we did, because when you are 5 or 10,000 people near the river, everyone thinks it's great to be near the river. And then the mayor and the urban developers say, oh yeah, it's true, it's really great to be here near the river. So perhaps we could put 2 stories more here and not build here. So we are also changing the way the city is being done by being involved in that project. If those projects are very strong, they shine and they make people proud of what is happening. So it's always a fight. We have to get power in order to discuss with those guys. And I think at this point, the politics is very important. The local community, they have to support this kind of projects because they don't have the money now to do it by zero. And so they have to support us in order to be possible. I took this example of putting 2 stories more here. In the zoning, it was not possible, but they decided that it would be possible. And that's where I think we need the politics to be careful that all our needs are listened and that we can face the others. Of course, one of the ingredients is to be visible, so to make diffusion, artistic, how do you call that? Like community events when all the young people, they come together to make this big sand beach where they could make beach volley afterwards. Then of course we have to make nice things, we have to invent, so make bubbles and be also careful in the programmation to be able to attract many different of people. So that's always a game. If you want black communities, you make such programmation. If you want an old woman, you have to. And so we always try to mix programmation in order to be able to mix the publics. Of course, we also do huge parties because this is also difficult nowadays. How do we party? How do we have fun together? In France, it's most of the time, at least in Paris, it's in black boxes underground. Inside Paris, it's expensive to go inside. So many young people from the suburbs, they couldn't go inside. And so also it's boring to be in a black box. So it's a new way to discover the city by partying. And it's quite a big movement in Paris for the last 10 years to organize temporary events to appropriate old industrial spaces, as you can imagine is the case in Berlin for the last 20 years. So, of course, there's also an issue of how do you deal with this. This is like, I think, 22,000 feet square, so it's a huge building. It was also possible to appropriate that building because it was not on the market. I mean, a bank wouldn't rent it. So That's why the owner would lend it to us. And so that means that it's not in a big shape, in a great shape. So you have a crappy building. And so after 10 years of activating, of doing surprising things, etc., now we are buying the building. So the idea is to be autonomous. Also, you have to know that from the beginning, there was really that autonomous way of governing the project and financing the project. We had models more in Kinshasa, in Johannesburg, than in New York or in Berlin. We think that when you have a really need, then you find the ways and you organize and you coordinate and you have low expenses, low in order to get cheap, to keep cheap rents. So now, in order to continue that after 10 years, because now the building is that it is at the end of what's possible, we need to put a lot of money in the building, so that's why we buy it. We made a cooperative, we made a social a company, and so we have now 3 structures, an NGO, a cooperative, and a normal company. And those 3 structures have different goals and all together. So we try to use normal tools like enterprise, neoliberal tools in order to attain our goals. And let's say, like everything, project is something alive. So in the beginning, you are a baby, you don't know anything. Then you are a child, you have so much energy, but sometimes you go wrong. Then you are a teenager, you do crazy things. Then you become adults, and then you become old. So we have to know that, and we have to be careful to fight all the time what this time of the life is trying to bring us, and to we also have to fight a lot to keep diversity, because I think this is a kind of biological rule. When you have only the same kind, when you have a lot of same kind of people, it attracts the same people. So you have to fight to mutate inside, to be diverse in order to adapt to the environment, which is of course changing. The dream, the fiction, the narrative, we do this festival for the last 10 years, the Dream Factory. Let me show you a few more projects. As an architect, because I try to use all the different ways of building the city, so I do also collective housing and things like that. Here I show you very briefly a collective housing project, which is a participative and grouped project. So it's a building of 25 apartments. Wait, which is a better? And because I worked with the future inhabitants from the beginning, it was possible to do the building differently. When you work with a professional housing developer, he wants this kind of apartment because he thinks he has the solution. He wants this and this and this. When you work with the final users, you can change it. You can think that those people, they want something different. And so it was possible to make a terrace on the roof. Those are building photos. So it was possible to make like 2,000 square feet of common spaces in the building. We have a common laundry, we have a huge place for the bicycle, we have 2 common living rooms, we have a common kitchen. We were able to build all this building out of wood. So when you are with the final users, you are able to make other decisions. Otherwise, you are always classical. So that's, again, important to say that if the final user is involved from the beginning, then he can be aware, he can be responsible, because also you share, you educate all together, and then you can do something which is let's say, more adapted. Even, I would say, the shape of the building, if I would have done the project as an architect alone, I wouldn't have done that at all. So it's being humble also in our practice. If you think that all those different partners should have something to say, then you have less to say. This is another project I wanted to show you. It's an old swimming pool. You know, those swimming pools they did like 50 years ago, which are not adapted for now. So now they do a really great swimming pool just near. But all the people in the city, they learned to swim in that pool. So it's a kind of heritage. It's something important. And it was built out of concrete, so it's difficult to demolish it. And it's still here. So what can it become? So the city of Saint-Geneviève-des-Bois, which is a little town 50 kilometers south of Paris, came to see me in the 6B and says, wow, it's great what you did in that place. It's autonomous, okay, but we are a city, local community. How could we do something like that in our swimming pool? So I told them we don't have to do like we did in 6B with the civic society alone, etc. We should be able to do something together, but you have to work differently. So I worked with them for 2 years to invent the program, to meet the local inhabitants, associations, entrepreneurs, to find what they want to do in that swimming pool. So we found a program, we found a budget, and then we did that project, and it ended, I think, in a great project. So this is the old swimming pool, though. So you can see also the symbols. How do we put that into our contemporary world? So the idea was to make a collaborative place with work, with meeting, with art, with diffusion. And so we did a lot of models with the people. We did many interviews. And this is the swimming pool. And here you can see the project which is coming. So the idea was to make everything out of wood inside and to touch the minimum, the existing building, and to keep its identity. So we did put some wooden boxes and things like that in order to activate. And this place was open 6 months ago. It ended to be such a program I thought would only function in the center of a city. Those kind of place with co-working, with solidarity, I thought this was for the inside. And at the inauguration, there was like 8,000 people coming in 2 days because they wanted to know what was this swimming pool being done, what was possible, and also because they need the same things to meet. They are fed up with meeting in the mall. They don't go to the church. They don't know where to go. So we have to invent nowadays new places to share, to meet, to invent, to get pleasure. So those are a few photos of the project. As you imagine, it was very frugal. We spent the less money we could. We tried to be gentle with the environment. We keep all the symbolic things of the swimming pool, and we try to bring freedom and possibilities. That's a word perhaps which is very important for me that I didn't use, is the freedom. I think that if you want people to be active, they have to be free. They have to be free to decide. They want to come, they don't want. And so being free is having a private space. We can see it also in the 6B. You have your private space. And because you are well in your private space, then you would get involved in the commons. So that's, I would say, 3.5 year process to do that project. Let's say it's 1 year more than if you would do it classically with a guy who's programming, etc. But I think they earn much more because the program and what is were done will last much more. Okay, I'm almost finished. Two more projects or three, because because of this practice of temporary projects, of involving things, of trying to invent new ways of occupying the city. The mayor of Paris came to me 3 years ago with this big problematic. I think you heard about it. We have many migrants. We call them migrants nowadays, coming to Paris, coming to France from, let's say, Africa and Middle East, Afghanistan. And they were living in the streets. And there is not so many people living in the street in Paris center, perhaps not like here, I don't know. And so they wanted to find a solution, to host, to wait until they have papers, because there is this paper which is very strong. They are coming from another place, though. Are they able to stay or not? That's a question. But anyway, you shouldn't leave those people in the street. You should do something to host them. And so they asked me to make a camp, a refugee camp, how we could call it, and saying we are in Paris, we are not in the middle of the desert, so what is a refugee camp in Paris to host emergency problems? So there was this building which was unused for the coming 2 years. And so the idea was to have this spot like an entrance in Paris. All the people would come in that place. They could stay 1-2 weeks, and then they would go in another place. And this association, which is called Emmaus Solidarité, was one, let's say, the project. And so I worked with them, and it was really a great project. It was really amazing because we had 2.5 months to build that project, which was hosting 500 people sleeping, which was hosting a little hospital, which was hosting a place to meet. And so we spent $8 million in 2 months. So I had to work with like 40 different companies to be able to build all those things so quickly. And because of this situation of emergency, it was then possible to propose new solutions. So it's always this question of how to find new ways. And so because there was a politic willingness, because there was the rush, because there was the money, it was possible to invent different ways. So you can see, for example, here, so this was the team. I work all the time with so many people. You imagine in the 6B, we are like 30 people invested every week. In EXYZT, we were 3 to 50 people working together. In AOA, we were like 10 people. So I'm never alone. I'm here alone today, but please trust me, and you can understand that it's always with so many great people and people who have the skills. So here you can see the maîtrise d'œuvre, architects, engineers, and so many specialists, and then also the different companies. Let's go fast on that. So we did, this is the entrance. It's inflated volume, so that's quite non-typical. And we did that with Hans-Walter Müller, who's a very old guy who's doing that for the last 50 years, and who says this is a kind of architecture because it's very alive. If you don't push the air inside, it gets down. So it's very less energy to build that. And because it was a temporary project, we thought it was a great idea. So we change the laws, because in this kind of volumes you are not able to put a volume inside. But because there was an emergency and political willingness, we were able to put volumes inside. So we call it jurisprudence in France. It means that now we did it once, so it's possible to make it again. So we cannot even change a bit the law. So you can see those containers that we changed, and though there were the desks where this is Hans here, Hans Walter, always collaboration. And so you can see this volume is quite non-typical, it's like symbolic, it's also to bring beauty in that neighborhood. And in those very social programs, the idea is to say, even in those moments, we are able to make something nice, to make something experimental, but better than what we could do. So we worked, as you see, we worked with containers. This was a health place. And then inside the building, we made different neighborhoods. So it's like a city, either with public spaces, with the street, with the intimacy in the room, and with common shared places. So we worked with wood to make the rooms. We brought colors to make it easy to find in which street you are, because all the people speak different languages. This is in one room. So one room is 45 square feet, so it's very little. But every bed has a plug for electricity, has a intimacy, and there are many other spaces in the neighborhood, so they could spend that time. Those are the entrance of the neighborhoods. It was also we were able to work with scaffolding, because after 2 years we had to transport it. And because the government changed, they asked us not to build it again. So now we stock it in a place, hoping that the politics will change again and that we will be able to use those again. Of course, it's not only sleeping, it's everything, sports, cinema, places to meet. So in those emergency situations, I think it's very possible also to do differently and to reuse the existing building and to respond to contemporary needs who are not the same today and tomorrow. This is another place we do a bit this kind of projects, but just for winter, because in winter time in Paris it's very cold. And so I wanted to show you, because the architecture gesture in that project is very perhaps non-existing. We bought tents, we organized, but we tried to organize the things so that everything was possible. It's not inventing an object, it's just organizing and also obeying to the codes, so it's possible to use that empty building during the winter. It's really important, as you know, to work with specialists, and Emmaus Solidarité, it's a great pleasure to work with them, because they understand that it's important to work with artists, to have many people accompanying the inhabitants. So I'm also, let's say, quite proud of this kind of projects, because they cost very little money, they are very adaptable to the city, and they are useful for those people who live outside. So you see, we reuse the containers we did for the first. And those photos I show you were taken by Luca Nicolao, who's a photographer. And so it's always a way also to change the point of view. Okay, I won't show you this one, so I show you very quickly. We finished that project last week. It was an old parking in the south of Paris, and we transformed it into an emergency housing also. So it's also for 2 years. It's more with this ludic, with playful way of doing it, of mixing publics. So we have a ground floor which is open to everyone, with a concert hall, with a lavatory, with a library, and then on the floors, on top floors, we have rooms for the people, and then we have a rooftop. So I'm very happy nowadays to be able to mix different programs, emergency housing with leisure, with pleasure, with the needs of meetings in the city. So it's always this idea of getting just next to. Okay, I showed it, and I will finish very briefly on this Bastille. So this is Place de la Bastille in Paris. So I won a competition 3 years ago to design this public space with a collective. It's not, let's say, it's not Julien, the architect. It was really a collective that we organized, which is Collective Bastille, in which there were artists, sociologists, and so many different skills. And so the idea of the mayor of Paris, they decided to transform 7 public spaces at the same time with a very little amount of money, but with a very big willingness of transforming it in order to adapt to contemporary needs. Let's say the public spaces were made for cars, and now we need something else. So you see it's a very big turnaround for cars, and now it's building time. It will be finished in 3-4 months from now. And so the idea was to transform that space. You can see we have the opera, we have the Porte de l'Arsenal. We have so many important things in that spot, and of course the historical of the place. So we worked for 2 years, either on plans like that to reveal the history, to really think of what it was, what it is, but also in a very interactive way. So we had containers, we made meetings, we made promenades, we did things with blind people to understand how to live the public space. We made so many different kinds of ways to design, because the idea was to make the design. So, for example, they dig it last week. It was in the newspaper. They dig this big hole. So, with all this process, we were able to say to the politics, the canal is passing underneath, and it would be great if we could see it and if we could go into it. And so we decided that in some atelier with the inhabitants, and everyone at the end said, oh, that's a great idea. So they found the money, and now they are making this hall. And so, of course, we had to use normal drawings to convince everyone. Actually, they were wondering for the last 10 years, they wanted to connect the Bassin de l'Arsenal with the Place de la Bastille, but they thought they had to pass on top of the subway. And we said, no, let's pass underneath. So sometimes it's very easy things, but you don't think about it. Also, Place de la Bastille was the entrance for furniture in Paris, woods and everything in the old time. You can see here on this island, there was just wood, and then it would go here in the Porte de l'Arsenal, and then this is Bastille, the old prison. So this neighborhood you can see here was really the place where we would work and transform the materials. So we said we want to keep that history and to work. So we didn't even just do meetings, we built things with the inhabitants, with everyone, and also to experiment furniture, urban furniture, and to try to say that it doesn't have to be sticked in the ground, that it could be movable. And so it was really great. For 1.5 years, we had all those modules in the public space, and people would take it to climb, to make skating, or just to chill. So it was also a way of designing, involving people into the project so they feel they are responsible of what is happening. Thank you.
Right, so now we'll open it up to questions. If you have a question, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. And I'm happy to get us started. Thank you, Julien, for that excellent talk. Now, as you know, locally, Oakland also has many industrial spaces that that get repurposed. When you talked about temporary spaces, repurposing industrial spaces for housing marginalized groups, for making space for the arts, locally that raises memories of a really terrible tragedy that happened a while ago. It was the Ghost Ship Fire, where we had an industrial space that had been built out as a space for living, that then also hosted parties and events, and during one of those parties, a fire started, and many people perished, and it touched the university community and many other local communities quite profoundly. Now, you talked about being able to get around the ways usually things are done, for example, for the refugee structure, but you also showed how you work with groups of engineers, of specialists, and satisfy the building codes. So I'm wondering what we might learn from your practice here. How do you balance flexibility, making space for the arts, for non-commercial projects, with the need for keeping people safe, and doing this on a low budget?
That's, of course, a big question. The first thing I would say, and this is changing, it was not the case, let's say, 20 years ago. I think that we need skills. In all the projects, we need all the skills to be involved into it. So we need an engineer to check the structure, we need a fire specialist, even if it's a slum. So I think that it's not possible to be blind in what is existing. So as an architect, I think that I have to work in those places, in those situations. Then, of course, the project is different all the time. You have to adapt. If this project doesn't have so much money, you would try to find other ways to respond to the fire problems. For example, we call it mesures compensatoires in French. So let's say compensatory solutions. If you don't have the fire alarm, perhaps you have all the time 3 people specialized in fire problems who are very careful. So it's always try to find the solution which is adapted to the means of the users and to the normal code. So we need people like us. I speak as an architect, but I could be a lawyer. It's the same thing. When you have to make the lease, the contract from the owner and the user, we have to be very clever, and we have to do strong things, to find strong solutions, to be able to protect everyone and to be able to find a fair response.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk. I have a question about some of the earlier work of your professional career, specifically the nonprofit stuff. I was wondering where the funding came from for most of those projects.
So the two questions. First, how do we survive when we don't get paid in our work? And then how do we do the project? First, I would say, how do we do the project? With the available money. So usually it was an application, let's say, like the Emetre in Barcelona with this tower. We got 30,000 euros to do it. So the festival gave us the money in order to build it. But we didn't take that money to pay transportation, to pay all those things. So we just took the scaffolding and paid what we would like to make it possible. Then, for us, at this time, it was the beginning of 3D modeling and making images. And because we were young students, we learned those tools. And on the market, we were very valuable. So we would make 3D images for a week. We would get like 5,000 euros, and then for months we didn't get paid because we had enough. So in our personal life, in your personal balance, it's also to find ways you get a lot of money in that, and you don't get a lot of money in that. And still nowadays, I would say, in my practice, at least half of the time I work is for free, and the other half is paid. Then the important is how you pay your bill at the end of the month. So if you don't have so many bills, it's better. So it's about earning money, and it's about expenses also. Let's try to be ingenious in order not to spend so much money all the time.
And then at the beginning of your presentation, you said that to be barefoot. Would you be able to elaborate on that? You're talking about your methodologies, everything like that.
Yeah, I took that from Yona Friedman's book, which is The Architecture of Survival. And he developed that concept, especially in India. He was working for the United Nations and trying to find other ways of involving people. And if you want to involve really poor people, let's say, you have to take time with them. You have to be on the same level. And that's what I say when I say barefoot, is that you don't come with your great car in the middle of the slum and take 2 minutes to say, okay, that's what we are going to do. You go there with your bicycle, with your shoes, of course, and you spend time with them, and you wait, and you ask, and you wonder, and you are humble. It was you are humble, and you listen, and then you come back again, and you say, oh, we took your ID, and look, this is really great. And it's not me as an architect who found the solution. It's you who thought that was the best solution. And so it's a way to say that we can get to the same level in order to cooperate more efficiently. It's also a way to say we don't need to earn so much money. It's also about personal épanouissement. How do you get your personal balance? You have to be happy. You have to find your personal things. And if you think that barefoot you can be happy, perhaps it's easier.
Thank you, Julien. I really appreciate the ideas and the solutions that you and your team came up with. And I recognize, to your point, that I was working in conjunction with the authorities. The folks either held the land or had the ability to give the green light or not. And I also appreciate that you did the work within code. I have a perception, as a personal perception, of perhaps a difference between the way French society looks at permission and possibility, and the way, and I'm generalizing about the United States because it's a big country and there's lots of different approaches. But here in the Bay Area, I also find while there's a very openness to thought, there's also a sort of closed-minded approach, and maybe I'm taking the negative approach, but that it's, this is too dangerous, it's too risky to try something. Just your example of the street furniture, that it was left, in essence, unattended, and then people could reconfigure for their own purpose. That sounds amazing, but also I can't imagine a civic authority here being on board with that because of the possibility. So I wonder, in your experience, I know primarily in France, could you apply that? How would you apply those experiences and those permissions given with what you've witnessed so far in the United States?
First, I would say those street furnitures, we did that less than a year after those big attentats in Paris. So it was difficult to do that. Now it was even not possible to organize big public events because you would have to make barriers all around to check that people don't have guns. And so it costs more money to organize it than whatever you could get for incomes. So it's about translation, convincing that it's possible. Even, Place de la Bastille, there are all those manifestations over there. So the police told us the furniture has to weigh more than 150 kilos. Okay, let's do that. So we do 250 kilos furniture. And so we have to be 6 people or 8 people to carry it. But then they say, okay, they won't throw it onto cups. So all the time, you have to find why is it blocking, and you have to respond to that. And at the end, it's possible to do it. But you also have to be careful and to be humble. Otherwise, they wouldn't let you do it. So it's always this game of go and some things work, some things don't work. I show you we wanted to work with the wood. I didn't say it, but you have many trees in Paris and they cut it because they have to change them. And so we had this idea of the Paris wood. We said we have the new product, local wood, and so we would use them to make urban furniture and even to sell to the Parisians because they will be very happy to have a chair who grew in the street. And so we tried that for a year to bring a place to cut the wood in the public space and all of that. And they didn't let us because they said you have to do that outside the city. But we tried a lot. So I would say when you have 10 fights, you win 1 or 2. And so you have to have many, many differences because we cannot find the solutions to all those crazy ideas. Then the other thing with the code and with the fairness, that's I think the main problem in our society is that no one wants to be responsible. If you find someone who can be responsible, you can do it. And then, so that's why I was for years and years the president of the 6B, because there was no fire alarm, because it was a bit tricky. We were really on the line, perhaps a bit too much, and we were very lucky. But I took the responsibility. And now we are buying the building, so we will be even more responsible because we will be the landlord and the user. And so I think the idea is to take our responsibility. And perhaps to say to the mayor, I write you a paper, you are not responsible of it. If this makes it possible. And then you take the risk, and you measure the risk all the time. For example, in the 6B, when we organize a party, because also we have lots of crimes and things like that in the neighborhood, we have 2 times more security guards, because we don't want to die in the fire.